What's up, everybody? How's it going?
Another day in paradise.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone so much for tuning into the Vanguard live stream, another edition of our live show. We got a super special guest, friend of the show, joining us today once again, Manuel Brown. But before we introduce him to the stream and get that going, I did want to get the housekeeping out of the way, as you like to say, Zach. Shout out these patrons. Thanks so much to everyone supporting the show on patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. The link for that is in the description, guys. If you want to join our patron community, there's a lot of cool benefits we like to offer our patrons, including the shout outs at the beginning and end of all of our live streams and at the end of all of our videos in the credits. So we like to make sure it's worth the support, worth the money. But yeah, we also offer early access to our book club episodes, exclusive access to our Discord server, priority on our monthly Q&A, and a bunch of other cool stuff. So you guys are definitely going to want to check that out. Again, the link is in the description, patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. But yeah, we're super glad to be back. We got a lot of good stories to go over today, some interesting stuff, some juicy stuff, some breaking news. So all kinds of good things to get into today. And like I said, we're going to be welcoming back a friend of the show, Manny Brown. But do you have anything to say before we get started, Zach?
No, obviously just stoked to talk to good friend Manny. Obviously the Any Given Sunday podcast. He's sort of like our resident sports guy, so we might touch on some sports today, but for the most part, just excited to have him back on the show, shoot the shit a little bit, and get into it. Because like I said, we haven't. Yesterday we took a day off, kind of the shit hit the fan, Cuomo, all that fucking stuff. So yeah, we have so much to talk about. Dive into it. It'll be a good show.
Yeah, absolutely. So without further ado, it looks like maybe Manny's ready. Not 100% sure.
Let's
Manny,
bring it on
ready?
him. Manny, what's up?
You ready?
Guys?
Hey, what's up, man? We're live.
Oh, what's up, everybody? Glad to be back.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, man. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure and an honor.
Absolutely. Well, just to get things started, do you want to let everyone know what you do, Manny, where to find you, if they want to listen to your podcast or follow you on social media, where they could do that?
Well, thank you again for having me on. Thanks to the audience for listening and supporting and all that good stuff. As far as what I do, I host a wonderful show called Any Given Sunday. It's sports, politics, movies, whole bunch of other things, whatever kind of comes to our brain. And like it sounds, it's on every new episodes every Sunday. Although for the month of August, we're doing episodes on Monday. But yeah, Any Given Sunday, live on YouTube. We just started YouTubing just recently. It's been about a month.
That's awesome. I had no idea you were on YouTube now.
Yeah, you guys inspired us. You guys inspired us, so we just decided, hey, why not? Let's. YouTube is big enough for everybody, right? So
absolutely.
Let's just do the damn thing.
Yeah, that's actually a great thing to hear, Manny, because I feel like a lot of people kind of shoot themselves in the foot in the podcasting world by not putting their stuff on YouTube and just assuming that people are gonna like find it on Spotify or come across it, which is fine, but it's just, in my opinion, more likely to get the message out there if you're on YouTube, where a lot of people are consuming this kind of content.
There's like billions of people on YouTube.
Well, yeah, so dude, if you put out the Vanguard podcast, like a podcast, like people are relatively familiar with our numbers. If you watch the show, we'll get like 30 people to listen to it on Spotify. So it's just a wide fucking gap between the people that are listening to it on YouTube, finding shit on YouTube. And I don't know why the fuck that is, but it is that way. So super stoked to see you guys getting out there, swimming in the mud a little bit, getting in that shitstorm with us.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, you guys for real did inspire us. We just decided, hey, we had been talking about it for a while, and then we just finally decided, like, let's just do it. So we covered the NBA finals, and we did post-game shows live right after the games on Sundays. So yeah, we just basically just decided to go ahead and do it. So yeah, going back to the original point, Any Given Sunday, it's available, of course, on the podcast side of things. It's available on all platforms, and then of course on YouTube if you want to catch the live streams on Sundays. It's available on our YouTube page, Any Given Sunday podcast YouTube page. So I'm sure you guys can find it on YouTube. Oh, yeah. And then, of course, you can follow me, like my name says right there, at the Manuel Brown on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm everywhere. You guys can find me.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, let's get into the news a little bit. Let's get
into it.
Some stuff. I know that you're from New York, so I think an appropriate topic to start with is the resignation of mob boss himself, Andrew Cuomo. Finally stepped down after a long and treacherous, tumultuous battle with the state legislature, with a lot of accusers. Just this guy was embroiled in so much controversy, so many scandals as a governor, which is all quite hilarious given just how high he was in the public eye and the way the media was talking about him. Not even like a year ago? How long ago was it that he was getting like daily blowjobs from his own brother on CNN? Like, this was not that long ago when he was considered a presidential front runner for like 2024.
He's America's governor,
2028.
guys. Come on.
America's
I
governor.
don't feel
The
critical.
Gov
I don't
Daddy,
feel
which all
comfortable.
rings so much truer now.
Governor Daddy, whatever the adjectives that they use to describe this guy. I mean, he was America's governor. He was leadership personified, remember?
Yeah, and thanks to the raging, unchecked, fucking vicious anti-Italian sentiments that are just sweeping the nation right now, he was forced to disgrace his own family name by resigning. I just wondered what your thoughts were.
Well, Zach, I don't know if you noticed, but you can't describe anybody as being racist anymore. It's just their ethnic composition that predisposes them to, either be, act the way they do or touch women, unprovoked or whatever. It's just your ethnic DNA. It's not racism. It's not sexism. It's not pervertedism. It's none of that. It's just you're Italian or you're black or you're white. No, all joking aside, long overdue with this guy. I mean, he's been a scumbag forever. I mean, that whole family isn't exactly, saint, if you ask me. Look, he's just Cuomo is like the personification of everything that's wrong with the Democratic Party, right? Like he is like, if you looked up what is wrong with the Democratic Party, Cuomo's face would be just plastered on there. This is a guy that they plastered, he was convenient for them, right? They plastered him all over the media as the anti-Trump, right? Oh, look at his leadership style, his daily press conferences, all these things that they just push down our throats constantly. And for those that don't follow politics on a weekly or even daily basis, they bought into it, right? They fed into it. It's like, oh, well, he must be doing something right. He's the governor of New York, and the media tells me all these great things. But of course, if you read between the lines, or if you do any digging on this guy, he's been union busting. He's been anti-progressive legislation and policies forever. I mean, he's just been horrible. He's not a friend of the progressive community at all. He's just a scumbag, and he's been a scumbag for a long time. And it finally caught up with him. But it's sad that it took. Well, I don't want to say sad, but it's sad that it took, him touching women or touching women in his staff inappropriately for this to come to light when he's been a scumbag forever. And the fact, and the one thing that I want to highlight to folks, right, is that while this man was parading around the country, basically, being showered with praise and bouquets, old people were dying in New York City. And I want people to really, really let that sink in, that literally, as this man was winning an Emmy, this man won an Emmy. It's like he won an Emmy. And yeah, his policies and his corruptness basically allowed, hundreds of older folks to die in elderly centers and stuff like that. And
I think it's so crazy that no one is talking about that element of the story. And I think you're also absolutely correct, Manny, that Cuomo really truly embodied some of the worst aspects of the Democratic Party. And honestly, I've seen some liberals being kind of salty about this news, being like, why do we have to hold our politicians to this standard when all these Republicans get away with all kinds of stuff? Like, look at what Trump got away with. Why wasn't he held accountable? Why are we holding a different standard to Andrew Cuomo? And it's just so funny because it's like, if you're actually, rah team Democrat, then you should be glad that the Democratic Party is actually holding this guy accountable. This guy exposed all the hypocrisies of the Democratic Party because, Democrats love to go over the sex crimes and all the sex pests over on the other aisle. But then when it comes to Cuomo, when it comes to one of their own, he's propped up here as this hero, and his accusers are smeared, just like Joe Biden's with Tara Reade. So if you're a Democrat and you're, in the best interest in preserving the integrity of the Democratic Party, that's what you want, then you should be celebrating the fact that this fucking guy has been removed like a tumor. Because that's what he was on the party. And again, I'm not someone that's like, rah, let's go Democrats. But if you are, then Andrew Cuomo definitely was not a good thing as far as association goes, as far as hypocrisy goes. It's definitely a good thing that he's gone, in my opinion. And there's a lot of details about this story that are pretty crazy. But I think that Ross Barkan actually at The Nation wrote a really good piece breaking down some of this stuff and explaining just how powerful that Andrew Cuomo was, and also, just exactly how disgraced he was. And it says that here, unlike most other politicians failed in sex scandals, there are many other reasons for driving Cuomo from public life. He mismanaged the pandemic and purposely hid the true death toll in nursing homes. He made $5 million writing a propaganda memoir last year, engineering state policy to make himself look better in the media. So again, just a great piece from a series of great pieces from Ross Barkan over at The Nation, kind of going into just how despicable this guy was, just how terrible his record has been, and just how good of a thing it is that he's finally fallen from grace, fallen from power.
Yeah, and I think that one of the other things about this that maybe might go unnoticed, or I guess should be introspected, I guess, for those individuals that you were just discussing, Gavin, those people that still want to see the Democratic Party actually cleansed of the Cuomo tumors, etc. But the one of the things that I just think is so disgusting about American politics from the side is that obviously you have leftists on our in our world, people, and I imagine there are some mainstream reporters that I don't follow that closely that are still really barking up the nursing home death tree. But it seems like that was never going to impeach him, right? This murder of, if indirect murder, manslaughter of all these people that he as governor was responsible for, that was never going to be enough for the tides into Albany, regardless of the progressives that have been sent there, people that are, friends of the show maybe, or people that we look up to. We don't have any really friends of the show that are politicians, but you know what I mean? The people that we've talked to, and I agree with their policies, that have moved to Albany and whatever are cool. Yeah, Gavin will be back in 1 second. But anyway, I think that one thing that needs to be reckoned with as Democrats, as people who do always want to be, morally virtuous, and I'll say Democrats, even though I don't really include myself in that, but they do have this aura of always wanting to be on the top of Mount altruism, right? And yet they're willing to completely overlook all of this until it becomes so odious and something that they would be dramatic, just bold-faced hypocrites for not addressing when the Attorney General comes out with multiple credible accusations from multiple women. There's really no, their hands were really forced. So I don't know. It's just an interesting dynamic at play here. I don't want to say that it's bad that, this is what did it, because obviously those women deserve justice. They deserve to have all of that said. But, we should have also been able to handle this and get him kicked out of office when the expose about what was happening in the nursing homes came out.
No, it's perfect what you just said about the altruism of the Democratic Party and liberals in general, right? It's almost like decency porn that they crave after, right? It's just this idea that they're holier than thou, that's just the Republicans. We don't do that over here. And, you open up the closet doors and they've got a bunch of picadillos and a bunch of skeletons hidden in their closets, but they do it nicely. Instead of, they do all their corruption, but they're nice about it, guys. They say nice things. And, Elizabeth Warren makes a video for the DNC and she has BLM blocks behind her. So she can't possibly be a bad person, right? Look at all these things that they stand for. They don't stand for anything. Andrew Cuomo, he really is the Democratic version of Donald Trump. He just doesn't have the rhetoric. If you literally look at Andrew Cuomo's career in politics and how he ran New York as a governor, he's essentially Donald Trump just without the rhetoric.
Yeah, he's an institution in the town, which is another way that Democrats love to protect their guys. It's like, oh, well, remember his father who was such a great man, and then they have his brother who they're given fucking sabbaticals at CNN so that he can go, figure out how they're going to propagandize the fucking public to make sure that his brother stays okay. Yeah, it's so fucking absurd.
Just think about that. His own brother is interviewing this man during the pandemic, during all of these crimes that are happening, and they're having softball interviews about whose nose is bigger and who's mom's favorite. Right, exactly. I just want people to really understand the level of just disgust that everyone should have for this story.
And then after the scandal broke and these accusers came out, Cuomo was like, well, I'm going to step away from this coverage because it would be a conflict of interest to cover my family and my own brother. That wouldn't be responsible journalistically. After literally a year of sucking him off live on air while he's the governor of one of the biggest states in the country, it's absolutely insane. It's so crazy that, more people aren't outraged about that. But not only are they not outraged about it, they don't even get why they should be outraged. You'll talk to some people or see some people on Twitter and they're like, well, what do you think? Chris and Andrew Cuomo are going to talk to each other? They're brothers. Without even attempting to understand the conflict of interest.
You know what it is? It's not even so much that they should be, they're not even outraged. It's almost like they're immune. They're almost desensitized to it. It's almost like this thought of like, there's corruption on both sides. It's just, hey, it's the corruption on my side of the aisle, so I guess I'm good with it. Like, no, you should be upset about all corruption. Like, you should want corruption, whether you're a conservative, whether you're, whether you're liberal, whether you're a damn, libertarian. You should hate corruption on every side of the aisle, and it shouldn't just be, well, I'll raise the flag for corruption on the right if I'm a left, or vice versa. It shouldn't be that.
Yeah. Well, does anyone else have any more thoughts on Andrew Cuomo resigning before we move on to the next topic? Something I'm really excited to get your opinion on, Manny.
Yeah, well, actually, one thing that you brought up to me yesterday that I wanted to get Manny's reaction to, which was the fact that the AG of New York, Letitia James, I believe is her name, is that she went fucking hard after Andrew Cuomo, and she could have let him go. Do you think she's interested in running for governor in 2022?
Oh yeah, I'm sure she is. I mean, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that this was, career motivated. I'm not going to solely say that. I obviously there's something there. Obviously, it led to Cuomo being, or not impeached, but basically resigning, leaving public office. So there was definitely something there. But yeah, it's career motivated. I mean, Letitia James knows. She knows. Her name's been out there for a long time, and I would assume that she will definitely have her name in the hat as far as one of the contenders to take over that job in 2022.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens with that, and to see
That's going to be a big fight too, especially in 2022 with midterms. The governor of New York, the governor's mansion in New York is going to be a very interesting race.
Some people have said that it's not impossible that Cuomo runs again, even with all this.
Nah, he's done. He's listen, you can never say never, especially in politics, especially in today's day of politics. But nah, he's done. I can't see. I can't see him ever.
It was actually Ross Barkin, the
article
of that Nation article, that made that point, that he was like, I'm not going to rule out the possibility that Cuomo tries to come back. But
I mean, he'll try, but he'll hire his millions of dollars in analysts and advisors or whatever, and they'll stick their finger out there in the wind and see where it's blowing. But I don't
think it's going to happen either. I'm just saying that apparently this guy really does have quite an ego, and he's going to want to vindicate himself after this and try to, come back into the public light in some sort of a way. So
MSNBC, baby, that's his future. That's his future. Watch. He's going to be a political analyst for MSNBC.
The morning Cuomo.
Yes.
Someone made the point, though, that despite all the Fredo jokes, Chris Cuomo now has ascended to being the most powerful Cuomo. So, jokes aside.
Who knows? Maybe this is like some Machiavellian stuff here, where maybe Chris Cuomo leaked this out so that this was all him in the back room.
Now we'll see who mom loves more.
Right? Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, really appreciate your perspective as always, as a New Yorker, Manny. Or you don't live there anymore, right? You're in Seattle, right?
I am in the Pacific Northwest, but I still have ties and roots to New York, and Cuomo's a scumbag, so it's not a sad day for folks like me who hate Cuomo. So.
Well, I'm glad we're all in agreement there. I wasn't expecting this to be contentious, but again, glad for your perspective and insight. Well, first of all, I wanted to say shout out to Martin Langelis. Thanks so much for the $5. TYT is so good at digging its grave. Been for years. Got away with it until Mate and Greenwald. Then all hell broke loose. Nice work, guys. Keep it up. Thanks so much for the super chat, Martin. Really appreciate the comment and the donation. Genuinely helps the show. And that's actually a pretty decent segue into something else that has been brewing on Twitter and on YouTube a little bit, that I really wanted to get your opinion specifically on, Manny and Zach, because this is something that I actually kind of internally debate a lot in my own mind, something I go back and forth on, the virtues of this whole strategy and idea. And again, this has kind of been playing out via some discourse on Twitter and YouTube from a couple commentators that we like to talk about a lot on this show. So let's just start with this tweet from Cenk Uygur that kind of lit Twitter on fire a couple nights ago. He got ratioed pretty badly for this, but let's just take a look. And I just want to hear your honest response to the virtue of this message, Manny, regardless of Cenk Uygur or anyone else involved. I just want to know your actual opinion on this sentiment. He says, social issues are really important and worth fighting over, but maybe the left wing and the right wing should consider uniting on economic issues against corporate rule. We agree a lot more than people realize on those issues. Then we can go back to kicking each other's ass. And then he goes on to say, people on the left need to stop assuming that our side would immediately get duped by the right wing into voting for some racist fascist. Be extremely cautious, But what if we trick them into voting to raise their own wages or giving themselves free healthcare? So what do you think about this?
I'm kind of in agreement. I mean, listen, Cenk, I have my issues with Cenk. Listen, we could be here all day talking about Cenk Uygur and all the issues at TYT, of course. But no, I think he has a point here, and that's just something that I talk about constantly on my show, is that I think we're more united. Listen, on social issues, we're never. I'm of the mind, and my co-host kind of fights me on this. It's like, on social issues, I think the left and the right are as divided as we've ever been, and I think we're going to remain divided because politicians have figured out that if we just divide people along social lines, then they've won the game, because that means that they could just play this virtue signaling, and they could play the grievance politics to their advantage and never actually have to do anything or give people anything. But on economic issues, on issues that impact, me, you guys, our parents, our grandparents, et cetera, people down the street, our neighbors, our school teachers, people that impact us in our lives, I think we're actually more united than I think we like to give credit to. Sure, there's divides and there's differences of opinions, but I think that on healthcare, I think that on issues that affect wages and affect your own personal living conditions, I think that there is gains to be made there. And I think that if we spend time trying to focus on these issues as opposed to whatever, name the social issue of the day, right? I think that we could get a lot farther. Not saying that we shouldn't pay attention to these things, not saying that we shouldn't focus our efforts on those things, because obviously at the end of the day, all these issues matter in the grand scheme of things. But I think that he does have a point in that, if we just met halfway on a lot of these issues, we could get a lot of stuff done. And I've always said this too, like, there's a lot of poor conservatives out there. There's a lot of poor liberals out there that are all being duped by this system we call capitalism. So talk about that, highlight that, show that. And that's kind of the failings of the Democratic Party, is that we don't do that enough. We don't show that enough. We don't say, like, look, you voted Republican for how many on elections? Is that road on your street fixed yet? Do you have a wage increase at your job? You've been there 30 years. Do you have this? Do you have that? All of these things that we should bring to the forefront and highlight, and we don't. We spend time focusing on, grievances and identity politics. Yay, root for Kamala because she's Black and Indian. But what is Kamala going to do for you? And that's the things that we need to highlight and put to the forefront. So yeah, long story short, I think he does have a point there. I think that there are gains to be made if we just met more in the middle on some of these these economic issues that affect everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I hear in a lot of what you were saying and at Cenk's tweet, right? Like, obviously, Cenk is fucking, whatever. But this time right here, broken clocks right twice a day, right? So, to me, this just sends a wave of all the Thomas Frank I've read back to the front of my mind, right? The listen liberal type of politics, right? Where he talks about how, there was the McGovern Commission and this pivot that happened in the 70s to try and get the prioritize the liberals and the educated on social issues and move away from economic issues. And he makes this excellent point where he talks about The Family and the Grapes of Wrath. The Jodes, had that book been written in 2016, the Jodes are a family of Trump supporters, right? But for people who are familiar with The Grapes of Wrath, Tom Joad, right? Rage Against the Machine has that song, The Ghost of Tom Joad. It's about a dude that's pushed to the edge, and then he starts organizing the people, and he says, no, I'm going off with the strikes or the Reds, or right, the commies like us, right? And in under those conditions, right, you can create somebody who wants to unionize, who wants to fight for better wages, who wants to give people health care, who wants to feed their fucking children, who doesn't want to do that, right? Who wants to make sure that if they're a farmer, that the land that they're, working, like, this is something that, like, people want to pretend that people on the right don't care about the environment. How many people on the left have spent time out in the fucking farmland of this country, right? Those people give a fuck about the land that they're on because it's been there their whole their generation. Those people connect to the land in a way that none of us understand, that would only be surpassed probably by the way that, like, native indigenous people feel about the land, right? A lot of these farmers, and I'm not talking about the industrial agriculture. I'm talking about the families that are trying to hold on, and the places like Flyover Country where Gavin and I record in Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, right? Those people could be moved by a Green New Deal if if you prioritize farmland, dairy farmers, soybean farmers, those kinds of things, those people could all be reached. So yes, I don't ever want to compromise on the social issues that I really value and of course and are just life affirming for so many individuals. Of course, I would never compromise. Okay, we're going to sell out all the trans people; they don't get any rights, but the rest of us get healthcare. That's just not going to happen. But that being said, like we have to be populist, which means we have to build a big tent movement and fracturing ourselves off, cutting ourselves off at the legs before we even get going. You can have purity or you can have populism, but you can't have both.
Yeah, I totally agree with both you guys. And overall, I do think that Cenk's tweet was pretty on point, pretty accurate, something that I generally agree with, despite the fact that, like I said, sometimes I do internally debate the merits of, working across the aisle and all that. I think it does get into some interesting territory sometimes. But that being said, let's take a look at Vaush's response. I think he totally missed the point here. But yeah, let's look at this and then we can react and see if what he said had any merit to it.
Cenk made a tweet. Social issues are really important and worth fighting over, but maybe the left wing and right wing should consider uniting on economic issues against corporate rule. We agree a lot more than people realize on those issues. Then we can go back to kicking each other's ass. People on the left need to stop assuming that our side would immediately get duped by the right wing into voting for some racist fascist. Sure, be extremely cautious, but what if we tricked them into voting to raise their own wages? Or giving themselves free health care? I don't want anyone thinking I'm telling people to vote Republican. Their politicians are the worst people on earth. And you don't hold hands with extremist groups, you obviously fight them. But what if there are right-wing voters who also hate corporate rule and corruption? Now, he got ratioed for this, but to be fair, every Cenk tweet gets ratioed, largely because every group this might appeal to either hates him or hates the caveats he included. Cenk has a largely left liberal audience who is not going to be favorable to the idea of working with right-leaning people. And the people who are most in favor of this red-brown alliance bullshit are like Jimmy Dore fans, and Jimmy Dore fans hate Cenk more than anyone else in life.
So right off the bat, he's totally missing the point and misinterpreting Cenk's statement so that he can basically just take a shit on Jimmy Dore, try to take a pot shot at Jimmy Dore. And regardless of what you think of Jimmy Dore, this is a straw man that Vaush builds up just so that he can beat down time and time again exactly when people suggest what Cenk is suggesting here, a take that we all three agreed was very reasonable. That, there are people in this country, mostly disaffected, poor people, regardless of their race, that are easily suckered into right-wing talking points and culture war issues. Those people aren't too far gone. They're still reachable. They can still agree with us on basic economic principles, things like Medicare for all or raising a minimum wage that would improve everyone's quality of life. So that's what is being said, that they're actual people, actual citizens of this country, voters that can be reached because, people do know what's best for them, or they can be told, they can be explained what's best to them if it's, presented to them in their language with a real economic populist engine. That's what's being said. What Vaush is doing here and what he's done over and over again in the past is he says, no, what they're suggesting with is that we work with Nazis. No one fucking said that. No one fucking said that. No one has ever said that or suggested that. I would never say that we work with Nazis or work with fascists, etc. All that's being suggested is that, again, there are voters, citizens, people that probably don't even pay that much attention to politics. They've just been suckered in via the culture war issues, right-wing talking points, and virtue signaling coming from whoever they're listening to. These people are still winnable. That doesn't mean they're Nazis. Just because you're some random, disaffected person living in rural Missouri, for example, where, the state Zac and I live in, that doesn't mean you're a Nazi if you happen to vote, Republican, or you got suckered into Trump's faux populism, at least not in my opinion. I think that's a crazy statement to make that, trying to appeal to rural voters is akin to, let's work with Nazis. Let's, build allyship with fascists. What are you talking about? That's so dumb.
He listen, of course, Vaush misses the point. I mean, that's what he does best on 99% of things. That right there is the problem, right? Like, we just label these people fascists and Nazis. Like, listen, I have my issues with people that voted for Trump, but not all of them are racist. Not all of them are fascists or
basket of deplorables.
Basket of deplorables. No, some people really are just pissed off off and tired of the system, and they threw their hopes behind the ultimate anarchist and chaos agent. Now, did it work? Was it beneficial for them in the long run? No, and we agree with that. But to sit there and say like all these people are racist, or all these people are shitbags, or all these people are just the worst level of humanity possible, it's just terrible. It's terrible. And this is why we're in the situation that we're in, right? Because we want to label all liberals just snowflakes, or we want to label all conservatives just racists and a bunch of, basically Klans members. Like, and it's like there's no stepping away and actually like sitting there and having nuance and having nuanced discussions.
Right. And just like how some people will say, oh, well, if you're someone that ever voted Republican, then that means you automatically sign on to everything that the Republicans have ever done, every horrible, racist, horrible thing. I disagree with that, because there are people that I know whose opinions I respect, and they voted Democrat, something that I also don't think is necessarily something I would do. But I don't think that, people that vote Democrat necessarily sign off on everything that Joe Biden has done. I don't think that, people that decided that they were going to go for the lesser of two evils, or what, even though that wasn't my, approach. Right. I don't think that those people should be held responsible for every single horrific action that's gone down under the Biden administration or the Obama administration, etc. People like my mom or whatever, like, I don't think she's endorsing the worst aspects of the Obama platform just because she voted for him. In the same way, I'm going to take Trump voters, Republican voters, I'm going to, try to give them the benefit of the doubt too, and say, okay, so maybe you don't sign on to and agree with all the absolute worst, most degenerate aspects of the Republican Party. Maybe you voted because of XYZ, they said this, I fell for that, etc. There are real reasons why people end up voting. Maybe some people are just so baked in culturally, they've grown up their entire lives, their parents vote Republican, their brothers and sisters vote Republican. It's just what they do. That happens on both sides of the aisle, and I think we should try to give people the benefit of the doubt when they can genuinely be won over through conversation, dialogue, discourse. Just writing off everyone that votes differently than you or has in the past as a Nazi or a fascist is the dumbest possible shit I've ever heard, and the worst way to actually build a coalition that's capable of winning. But do you have anything to say on this, Zach?
Yeah, well, I agree with the sentiments and the points that you guys were both making, right? And as somebody who hosts his own Biden Voters Anonymous group, occasionally guys like Aaron Matte waft through. No, I'm kidding. I don't sign off on all the fucking bullshit that fucking Joe Biden's done, and I have to extend that same courtesy to the individuals that voted for Donald Trump. I'll give a fucking personal example. My grandmother voted for Donald Trump 2 times, right? She's in her 60s. She works at Walmart, rural Kansas woman, right? Got fucking fired from Walmart because she'd worked there for so long that she was like older than like her pay scale was worth to them, because they do this thing where everybody gets a raise based on the time that you've worked at Walmart, and then you're paying some like elderly woman like $16 an hour to do something, and they're like, okay, you're fired now. That is happening to lots of elderly people across America right now, because the Walton family is fucking full of shit, and Walmart's a terrible corporation, but this happens all the time, right? This is actually a really big problem that's happening in rural America, is elderly people who are predominantly the individuals right now that make up our rural demographics, that they're losing their jobs at places like that. One, because the competition is so much higher now, because there's no economic opportunity in rural areas, so you're seeing younger people who would have typically done some other kind of higher paying work now taking those jobs. Anyway, it's just leading to a lot of displacement, and this is the perfect opportunity to start talking about things like corporate monopoly, to start talking about things like workers' rights, to start talking about union protections, to start talking about why this is not right, what happened to you, why it's unacceptable that you worked for a company for 15 years and with no fault of your own, they decided that you're not worth the pay that they decided to give you anymore. And now you have to, as a 64-year-old, like almost to Social Security, not yet, you're in like a weird position. You're unemployable at this point, right? Like things like this happen. And that's the great point of jumping off for people who have voted Republican their entire lives, right? People who voted for Donald Trump because they thought Hillary, was fucking responsible for Benghazi and all that shit, and whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to reiterate too one more time, because Vaush loves to use this terminology. He'll describe this basically what Cenk was talking about, which is that, hey, maybe if we emphasize some of the economic issues, we can build a broader coalition that's actually capable of winning elections and taking power in this country. Vaush will take that approach and label it the Red-Brown Alliance, which, if you guys aren't aware, is a reference basically to, I think it was like World War II, like basically like communists uniting with fascists, because they both shared certain goals or whatever. And he's saying that that's what this is modern day equivalent to. But again, no one is advocating that we go out here, find like militias of fascist right wingers and work with them to achieve power. Oh, the only thing that's being suggested is that disaffected poor people, mostly living in economically devastated rural parts of the country, they should at least be reached out to and educated as to the actual goals of modern day leftism, economic leftism. That way, potentially, they can realize that their previously held beliefs are actually not productive for their lives nor their communities. And maybe they'll embrace some of the actual tenets of left-wing economic populism, such as healthcare for all, such as increased wages, such as increased union power, etc., that again would help literally all of us everywhere. That's all that's being suggested. And to say that we shouldn't reach out to people across the country that vote, because again, how they've maybe potentially voted in the past, I think is just electorally suicidal. And again, I don't want to, come off like I'm being insensitive. Obviously, I'm a white dude. I don't have the perspectives of everyone else. But that's just the way I see it.
No, and what it is just lazy, right? Because it's easy to just do this, right? It's easy to play this game and paint all Republicans as this or all Trump voters as that, and that's it. You do your job and that's it, right? You don't have to actually put in the work of having to, people call it changing hearts and minds. I don't even say that. I think it's just enlightenment, teaching people, giving people a different perspective. If you've grown up in rural Kansas your whole life, and the only perspective that you've only have ever seen, you've probably never even seen a person of color. And if you have, the only perspective that you've always seen is from this like really weird, sorted, right-wing perspective. So when you come to these places and you bring a different perspective, you bring a different way of thinking, man, maybe the light bulb turns on. Maybe like, I never actually had somebody explain it to me that way. And sure, you're not going to change everyone. You're going to have 100 people. You may influence 2. You may influence 5, 10, but that's more than you had yesterday. And that's the mindset that we have to have, right? That we have to actually try to reach out to people. Of course, some people there is no negotiating with. There is no reaching out. If you just have terrible views on issues, if you're a racist, if you're a fascist, if you don't care about these important economic issues because you're so far gone on a culture war perspective that you just don't give a fuck, then fine. Stay there. But it's the folks in the middle that don't know enough and sadly are being failed by our media system. That's another thing they need to highlight. Like, they're being failed by our media system and our politicians. We need to help those folks. Those are the ones that we need to reach out to.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, man. And I love what you said there about how it's not even necessarily about changing people's mind. It's just about enlightening them to begin with. A lot of people just don't even know what they're missing. They don't know what politics they're missing because they haven't been educated by the right people. They haven't been explained to or talked to by the right folks that can actually break it down, how these policies will help, not hurt their lives. We live in a country full of so much insidious corporate propaganda that's meant to, poison people's mind against concepts like socialism, against increased access to healthcare, against, living wages and union power, things that would undeniably uplift all aspects of society. Except for like the top 1%, obviously. But you know what I'm saying? There's so much propaganda out there against people's own self-interest that, yeah, the work we need to do is simply enlightening these people. It's not about sitting down across the table from a fascist and trying to, debate whether or not like people of color are just as good as white people. Obviously, that's not a debate that's worth anyone's time. And if someone's that far gone, then they're that far gone, and we shouldn't be trying to ally with them. But as far as just like regular working class people that, maybe they feel like cancel culture is a really big deal and that's why they're voting Republican. No, we should sit that person down and explain to them why, cancel culture is essentially a distractionary issue to fucking get your mind off of the real economic issues which are going on, which you could actually benefit from. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that the more we tackle these large issues, and the more that we satisfy the economic need, the community need that these people are missing from their lives, that drive people towards the right-wing extremism, right? Like there are causes for these things. Like, I'm not making excuses for the individuals who fall at the far end of it, but I'm saying if we work to unravel the societal conditions that drive largely white people to this fucking, crazy town of radical conservatism, is because you have a group of people who they have nothing, they have no job opportunities, they're probably heavily medicated, right? And then you give them this story that says, oh, it's not your fault, you have this skin, you're automatically better than other people, right? All this kinds of stuff. The only way to permanently eradicate that is to make the conditions that allow those people to fall into that toxic line of thinking so small, and then you can deal with it at this point. But you kind of have to have that Fred Hampton approach to all of this, right? You don't compromise your social positions, right? But you kind of walk into those situations and you meet people where they are and you interact with them and you find out the struggles that are in their lives and you try and say, how about this economic answer that I think is much better than the one that your phony pseudo-fascist leader is offering. What if we convince you on this one thing? And then that's kind of how the walls come down. But yeah,
it really comes down to a failure in leadership on all areas, right? Because to me, I think that in this current day that we live in, right, no one wants to be a leader anymore in the classic sense, because when I think about leadership, I for instance, a Fred Hampton, someone that was a very principled individual, but understood the power that he had, and also understood that in order to get the things that he wanted done, he had to work across the aisle. He had to work with different groups and different people that had common goals in order to advance the overall goal that he was trying to do. And there's many people like that. And I think that is what we need to get back to, is leaders in the classic sense that, look, I'm not going to always accomplish what I want, or I'm not always going to work with people that I may necessarily always 100% agree with. But as long as, the message is there and that we're changing people's perceptions and enlightening people on what's really going on, the real message that's out there, that's what's important.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I did want to play another clip, the first couple minutes of actually Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk's response to this whole situation, this little debate, again, playing out over Twitter based on, the virtues of working with people across the aisle, to try to increase the coalition, essentially. But yeah, let's take a look at his response to this and see if what he had to say warrants any more conversation.
Well, the new fight I should say the old fight actually, has reared its ugly head again, namely the fight on right-wing populism. So let me go ahead and throw this up on the screen. Cenk Uygur tweeted the following on this issue. He said, "Social issues are really important and worth fighting over, but maybe the left wing and the right wing should consider uniting on economic issues against corporate rule. We agree a lot more than people realize on those issues. Then we can go back to kicking each other's ass." So he continues there. You can see it on the screen. It says, "People on the left need to stop assuming that our side would immediately get duped by the right wing into voting for some racist fascist. Sure, be extremely cautious, but what if we trick them into voting to raise their own wages or giving themselves free health care? I don't want anyone thinking I'm telling people to vote Republican. Their politicians are the worst people on earth, and you don't hold hands with extremist groups. You obviously fight them. But what if there are right-wing voters who also have the corporate rule and corruption, who also, hate the corporate rule and corruption?" So what I would say to Cenk on this is, correct. That's right. And that's something I've advocated for a long time. I know Crystal's advocated for it for a long time. There are many of us on the left that advocate for it. And he made the important distinction. The distinction is the politicians are corrupt. They're full of shit. All of them on the right are like that. Even the ones they hold up as the ideal right-wing populists, like Josh Hawley. He was against $15 minimum wage. He's for what's called right to work, which is anti-union stuff, which is just right to work for less, 11% less, mind you. So the politicians are totally full of shit. But to Cenk's point, if you look at polling data, there are plenty of right-wing voters who don't even realize that they're actually pretty left-wing on economics. So they would be pro-union. They would be pro-living wage. They would be anti-corruption. And the list goes on and on. So, a good example of this is the former 2 times Obama voters who thought they were voting for change, and then they flipped to Trump thinking, hey, maybe Trump will bring the change and not outsource my job. Well, guess what? Trump did outsource your job, so they were duped again. They were duped by Obama, and they were duped by Trump. But those people who were 2 times Obama voters and flipped to Trump, many of them, assuming they're voting for economic reasons, they're not bad people. Now, they did overlook the Trump bigotry, but be honest and clear about what they were voting for. If they tell you I was voting for higher wages or voting to not outsource my job, that's what they mean. So in other words, those people are gettable. And take yes for an answer if you can change their mind. The voters, the average Joes and Janes, are the ones who we can reach. And by the way, over time, you could change their opinion.
And I just wanted to reiterate my point earlier that, yeah, just like it is true that how the Trump voters did overlook a lot of the bigotry and issues, I think you can, to be fair, you have to say the same thing about Democratic voters, that they also overlook the war crimes perpetuated by the Democratic Party,
Absolutely.
the war on drugs of Joe Biden, all that stuff. And again, I would never take someone that voted for Joe Biden and said, you are responsible for all this stuff and that you agree or sign off on it all. But I just think it needs to be said that people vote for a lot of reasons. When someone votes Democrat or Republican, they're not necessarily endorsing the full ticket or the full platform or everything it stands for. It's always kind of like you're between a rock and a hard place, and some people decide to pull either lever. But yeah, I just think that deserves to be said one more time. Let's take a few more minutes of this in.
Even more to where eventually they might not identify as a right-winger. So I think Cenk is right about that. Now let me go ahead and show Vaush's response to this, because this I think is really interesting. And I think he also has a point. So Vaush says, if right-wing populists were actually interested in economic reform, they would have supported Bernie. Instead, they support pro-oligarch billionaires like Trump. Why? Because right-wing economic populism is a hook to pull people to the right, not an actual policy goal. Agree on solutions, not problems. If right-wingers want better healthcare, fine, good. If they want you to drop the woke nonsense because it's preventing them from working with us towards economic goals, tell them to suck it up and prove their commitment to those goals. In other words, if economic reform is their real priority, why will they compromise on economic reform for Trump, but won't compromise on progressive issues for economic reform? So listen, he's correct also. And actually, I don't think what he said contradicts what Cenk said at all. I think
So I do think there's a grain of truth to what Vaush is saying there as far as the voting for Bernie aspect. But I would argue that had Bernie actually had the chance to run against Trump, a lot of these voters would have voted for Bernie Sanders. I think that there's a significant portion of people that voted for Trump because he kind of felt like the outsider, or he felt like the more populist out of the two candidates, whether it was Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, both of whom thoroughly kind of personify the establishment of the Democratic Party. With all his flaws, I guess some people, some ignorant people saw Trump as kind of an outsider, a populist character. But if Bernie had been the Democratic nominee in 2016 or 2020, I think that he would have come off as more of the outsider, as more of the populist, as more of the real change maker. And I think that he would have picked up a lot of votes of the kind of people that weren't necessarily raving, bigoted, racist, but they did, like you said, they wanted to throw a bomb at the system. They wanted to mix things up, change things up, put their middle finger up to the establishment. And again, Bernie would have done so not by appealing to the worst aspects among us, not by appealing to people's bigotry and racism, but by actually presenting a real message of progressive change. Here's a tangible platform of policy positions which will improve your life in X, Y, and Z ways without a shit ton of bureaucracy and technocracy involved, without a bunch of forms and means tested garbage. Bernie was excellent at cutting through all that, and I think that's why he definitely could have overcome Donald Trump, unlike a character like Hillary Clinton. But I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on that as well.
Well, everything you said about the Bernie point is spot on, right? And then, but I love how we drop these statements, right? And we, again, not having enough smartness to actually have a nuanced discussion, because we sit there and say, he says, well, why do right-wing populists are actually interested in economic reform? Do they vote? They did not support Bernie Sanders because they didn't have a chance to, right? Like, they didn't have this opportunity to. So you conveniently leave that part out, like, well, Bernie wasn't on the ticket. He wasn't the candidate. The candidate was Hillary Clinton. The candidate was Joe Biden, the architect of a lot of the issues that we're currently discussing now. Like, think about it from a right-wing perspective. If you're going out there and you're basically being thrown, your options are Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. That's literally what your options are. Like, so of course you're going to vote for Trump. And again, I'm not a Trump supporter. I can't fucking stand the guy. He's one of the worst things.
Man, he loves Trump. He hates,
right? Yeah, apparently, right?
He
yeah,
hates
exactly.
America.
Yeah, I'm a secret. This hat is not a Malcolm X hat. It's a MAGA hat, by the way. But no, seriously, like, Trump is one of the worst things to happen to American politics in a long time, obviously. But Hillary Clinton is just as bad, and people just don't want to admit it. She is. Her and her husband are the architects of a lot of the issues that we are currently facing in this country, and we don't talk about it enough. And the media primarily doesn't talk about it enough. So of course, from the right-wing perspective, yeah, you're going to go to who you think is your ally, who you think is more aligned with you on the issues than say someone who's not, right? In that case, and again, that's a mistake. They were wrong. But you to just automatically assume that they're full of shit, or they're not willing to work with us, or they're not willing to meet us halfway on economic issues because, oh well, they just supported Trump instead of Bernie. Well, Bernie wasn't the Bernie wasn't the guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you missing the point there.
They supported Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton, right? And obviously Hillary Clinton is a really tough sell, and she was actually a uniquely tough sell to get any Republican voters. So anybody who, you put the Republican voters in that sense in between a rock and a hard place, right? Like if we're trying to put ourselves in their shoes, me as a Biden voter that fucking hated the guy, that thought that he was the most corrupt buffoon of all time, but was just desperate that he would maybe like get back in the Iran deal and do a bunch of other shit that he fumbled and fucked up. I'll admit that.
Right.
But anyway, I have to imagine that, there were some Trump voters that were like, look, I'm not voting for Hillary Clinton. She did Benghazi. Okay, obviously Benghazi was fucking okay. But those people internalized that shit. Really, a lot of people did. People who want healthcare probably internalized the Benghazi shit. So that has to be reckoned with. How unpopular, how just terribly unpopular Hillary Clinton was in 2016 and all that time beforehand. And yes, how her husband was responsible for a bunch of shit, and how she herself was responsible for a bunch of shit. Let's not diminish her role as senator or secretary of state or all that kind of shit. So people had all kinds of reasons for being suspicious of Hillary Clinton. So when you take people who, yes, are on the other side of social issues from where they need to be, but they did agree with us on economic issues and probably would have been persuaded to vote for Bernie Sanders. Let's not forget, you have to be a fucking Democrat, registered as a Democrat, or depending on the state you're in, usually to vote in the primary. So even if they were registered as a Republican, so how are they going to express their support for Bernie Sanders? If you look at the polling on Bernie Sanders' ideas amongst Republicans, like Fox News doesn't even like to put it up on their fucking screen anymore, because it shows that over half of Republicans want shit like Medicare for all and higher wages and all that other stuff. But they instead, in the exact opposite way, that we took individuals like me who Aaron Matte, for all you fuckers in the comment section, you took Joe Biden and are still serious leftists. There have to be people who want economic change but don't want to give up the social issues right away. And so if you gave them the option, they're going to take, social issues over nothing that Hillary Clinton was going to offer them. But I think they would take economic issues over the social issues if you did give them that choice. So my response to Vaush is those people haven't ever had the opportunity to put their money where their mouth is and say that they want, economic reform over social issues. Just like the people that you're trying to deride as the Jimmy Dore left, or whatever the fuck you want to call them, haven't ever had the opportunity to choose fucking one thing or the other. We haven't ever actually had the opportunity to choose a candidate that represents these truly progressive policies on a broad scale way, because both times Bernie Sanders wasn't able to get the nomination. So I think that has to be said. And I also agreed with what you guys were saying beforehand.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And just to reinforce your point about just how terrible of a candidate Hillary Clinton was and how unelectable she was and how perfect of a foil she was for Fox News, it wasn't just the Benghazi stuff that she was embroiled in. A lot of people forget that she was literally under FBI investigation for her use of a private email server, something which a lot of liberals like to make fun of and, pretend that it was a non-issue. But it was an issue. It was a serious issue. You can't just use a private email server when you're Secretary of State to avoid people, getting access to your communications via FOIA requests, etc., leaks. That's what she was trying to avoid. And with all this shady Clinton Foundation stuff going on, it starts to make pretty good sense why that all happened. And there was, real smoke there. There was smoke there. And I don't blame people that, maybe it wasn't the biggest issue of all time, but it gave a lot of fodder for the Fox News hosts of the world to pretend like it certainly was. So, Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate, and Bernie Sanders definitely would have stomped Trump, unlike her. So, the Democrats love to blame third-party voters like me for Trump's election in the first place. But if they hadn't sabotaged Bernie Sanders, we never would have had to deal with Trump as a nation ever. He would have been, destroyed, halted in his tracks by Bernie Sanders. It would have been epic. It would have been a slaughter. But no, Trump was brought to us by the Democratic Party, specifically Hillary Clinton, who not only sabotaged Bernie Sanders, but elevated Donald Trump. The Pied Piper strategy. She actually elevated this guy because she thought he would be more beatable than the Ted Cruz's of the world, which is laughable, knowing how unlikable and disgraceful and, how hard it is for anyone to take a guy like Ted Cruz seriously. Anyway, I think that's worth saying. But as a final word on this subject, as it concerns Cenk's tweet, we're just giving Cenk a lot of credit for this, and I do think it's a pretty sensible, reasonable statement, like we all said. That being said, it needs to be pointed out. What Glenn Greenwald points out here. He says, "My favorite part of this tweet is how he thinks this is some profound epiphany where he alone just discovered this exciting insight that he just had to share when he's been demonizing those of us." Not just long saying this, but working to build it across many issues. So I think this is totally accurate from Glenn Greenwald. A lot of people, including Glenn, including the likes of ourselves, we've kind of been making this point for a long ass time now. It's been pretty obvious that it's going to take some sort of a strategy like this in order to really make a coalition capable of, gaining power, at least in my opinion. But here comes, Cenk Uygur, like, as if no one has ever thought of this before, as if it's his idea and he's like just, pontificating this brilliant solution. But as Glenn says, he's been literally demonizing those of us, like Vaush is now to him, calling us, red-brown alliance and, we're trying to work with fascists or what. Absolutely not. This is all we were ever suggesting. So thanks for catching up, Cenk.
Oh, yeah. And also just a little historical tidbit, because I Googled this. The Red-Brown Alliance occurred at the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union, when the remaining like the hardcore fascist element in the former USSR joined forces with the those who wanted to maintain totalitarian communism in a fight against the capitalization of Russia by the West. So that was the Red-Brown Alliance, and I'm sure there was all kinds of fucked up shit there. That's just what Wikipedia tells us.
No, Glenn is spot on that. But listen, hey, you know what? If it took him 20 years to get to the point that we've all been making, welcome. Finally, thank you. I at least he had credit to at least say, hey, you know what? I finally come around. There's some people that never come around. So, hey, we'll be nice to Cenk today. We'll be nice. How about that?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Cenk actually had a good take for once, even though he still got ratioed anyway for it.
And there's points that Vaush made that were spot on. That's the thing. You're always going to have, when we're having this political discourse, right? There's going to be good points and bad points on both sides, and you just have to take those kernels and, all right, good, great, that's a good point, that's a bad point. Absolutely. Or I don't necessarily agree with that point. That's okay. Not everybody's going to hit a home run on every at bat. Like sometimes you're going to hit a double, you're going to hit a single, sometimes you're going to strike out. But the overall point is, the overall crux is absolutely right, and he's spot on. And I think that listen, a lot of people still follows Cenk. A lot of people still are influenced by what he says. And hey, maybe he has a lot of people that used to think like him, and him by tweeting that hopefully enlightens other people. That's my hope.
No, I agree. And that's a good point, Manny. No need to be overly critical. I've said plenty of dumbass shit on this show, put my foot in my mouth many a time. So
if you've been alive on Earth longer than most people, you've said dumb shit. Trust me.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I think that was a really solid discussion about the merits of right-wing populism, working across the aisles, who's too far gone versus who's still pick-upable, etc. So really appreciate your perspective, Manny. One last subject we did want to talk about a little bit was President Obama. There's recently been some renewed reflection, I guess, about the legacy of President Obama and how he's spent his time in the post-presidency era. I think a lot of this conversation was kind of sparked by this ridiculous party he was throwing for his 60th birthday. I think that happened already, if I'm not mistaken.
So. Yeah, either it's happened or it's going to happen this weekend or something. Pretty much it's going to happen or has happened.
Yeah, I think it did happen. Okay. And I want to get into this Jacobin article a little bit before we play this clip. I thought this was a wonderful Jacobin article from Lisa Featherstone. It's called "Barack Obama has been one of the worst ex-presidents ever." And this is just a great breakdown of just how disappointing of an ex-president Obama has been. It says, all summer, millions of Americans this year worried about being evicted from their homes, catching the Delta variant, persuading recalcitrant loved ones to get vaccinated, or whether a COVID resurgence might keep schools closed in the fall. Former President Barack Obama was apparently loftily unbothered by any of these plebeian concerns. The distinguished memoirist was too busy planning a ginormous 60th birthday for himself on his vast and vulgar Martha's Vineyard estate, a sprawling 6,892-foot tumor on a beautifully spare coastal landscape, which the Obamas bought in 2019 for $11.75 million. The 475 guests were to include George Clooney and Oprah Winfrey.
Progressive liberal, progressive heroes, by the way. And George Clooney.
I think Pearl Jam also played at the event.
Yeah.
Even people close to him argued for weeks that as the White House was urging caution, given the recent COVID resurgence, that the optics of the shindig were not too good. Last week, he appeared for a moment to be conceding to internal Democratic Party pressure by disinviting most of the guests, limiting the celebration to family and close friends. But that soon turned out to be kind of a head fake as well. Anyway, this piece just goes on and basically talks about how here it says he's distinguished himself as an enemy of labor and a friend of racist cops. NBA players began to go on strike last August after Jacob Blake, a black man, was shot by police seven times in front of his kids in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I think we probably all remember that moment. Amid an uprising over the shooting and many other acts of racist police brutality, Obama called LeBron James and the players' union and urged them to get back on the court and finish the playoffs, which they did. And I actually remember this going down. I remember we made a video about this potential strike and how important it could be, how this could actually really spark a movement and really get.
I think I was on the show a couple weeks out. If not,
you were. We talked
after.
about this with you.
We talked about it. Yeah.
Anyway, so it's crazy that Obama shut that down. Of course, he also recently took a position with NBA. I think NBA Africa. He's like a creative partner or some bullshit like that. So
yeah, what do you think about that, Manny? NBA Africa. Obama's on the board.
Yeah, Obama's on the board of NBA Africa. Whoop-de-doo. He's bringing all the great policies and great reflective thinking that he brought to this country to, the NBA in Africa. I mean, look, listen, how involved is he on a day-to-day, running of that organization? Probably very little. He's just a name to just prop
just
it up.
giving him a bankroll because he fucked
exactly.
the
Listen, I've been dying to get into this because, I'm so disappointed in Obama, man, for so many reasons. I was someone that really came into politics in 2007 and 2008 and really kind of found my footing in politics. And Obama was one of those first political figures that really moved me and inspired me, obviously for obvious reasons, and being a black man doing something that no one to that point ever envisioned or thought would ever happen, being the first, African-American to not only, run a successful ticket for president, but obviously win and go on to become president, all that other stuff. And, just everything that candidacy and what he represented and what he could have been and all the hope, that we had for him, and just to see it just all evaporate really by the end of his first term, but definitely by the end of his second term, and that he just didn't accomplish
honestly, by
anything.
the end of his first 2 years.
Yeah, I was trying to be nice, but really his first year. I mean,
that's why he lost the House and the Senate. His super
this
majority.
guy came into office with a super majority. Like people forget that. Like
and
he
totally
came in and just squandered it. Didn't do shit.
He let all the bankers go instead of doing anything.
Right, exactly. Listen, we can revisit Obama's presidency from here to come, right? But Obama is just such an interesting figure, right? Because he is someone that had a lot of power and still has a lot of power and has a lot of impact on the American culture and the American electorate to this day, and he just refuses to do anything with it, of anything of merit.
Yeah, well,
right?
I think this piece actually does a great job of spelling out exactly what he has done with that power. It says here he was instrumental in shutting down Bernie Sanders' bid for the presidency, a huge setback to the movement for social democracy in the U.S. When Sanders was leading in the primaries, Obama worked to organize the other rival candidates to drop out and back Biden, making it possible for Sanders to win. He then persuaded Sanders to drop out of the race. And then also, this is super interesting, something I didn't even really know about. But the piece goes on to talk about his museum he's building in Chicago. It says the 3 memoir author is erecting a garish monument to himself. Where's that go? In Jackson Park, which community activists argue will wreak havoc on cherished green space and a fragile ecosystem, as well as upon the legal scaffolding for the very idea of the public interest. But this is even crazier. It says Obama is planning to live an additional ecological monstrosity in Hawaii owned by close crony Marty Nesbitt and developed for the Obamas. ProPublica reported last year that the Obamas' planned beach house has a controversial sea wall which protects the estate in storms, but is illegal because such structures disrupt the flow of the ocean and contribute to beach loss throughout the state. Not surprisingly, the sellers paid a substantial sum to the state to grant a loophole, which will keep the seawall in place for another 55 years. In Hawaii, beaches are considered a public responsibility, and extensive laws exist to protect them, but such easements to property owners are unfortunately common. Community members have been protesting the loss of the surrounding beaches, demanding that Nesbitt take down the seawall. Instead, the state is allowing he and the Obamas to expand it. So basically, like so many of these rich millionaires and billionaires, they're just going to construct their way around climate change and these additionally devastating to the ecology, sea walls and all this bullshit to protect their, precious beachfront property from the elements which their lifestyles are contributing to the deterioration of.
He's literally become the very thing he ran against. And he's so unself-aware that I don't think he even gets it. Like, I think he still doesn't get it. Like, he's literally become the very thing that he campaigned against, the very thing. Like, remember 2012 against Mitt Romney? He's become Mitt Romney. Like, that's literally what he's become. He's just become a black version of Mitt Romney. He has somewhat better social views than Mitt Romney and somewhat better political instincts than Mitt Romney, but he's literally become Mitt Romney. Like, that's essentially who he is now. And it's just so disheartening for someone that literally followed every footstep of him, as a candidate, and then of course followed him as a president, and just constantly being let down. And I myself found myself defending his moves and defending it. It's like, no, you don't understand. Look at the bigger picture. Oh, it's the obstructionist Republicans. And it's like, no, it's him. He never had intentions on doing anything. He never had intentions on fixing, the broken political system. He never had intentions on sending any of those Wall Street people to jail. Never, not once. Never. He was a phony. He's a fraud, and he's always been that. And I'm glad that you have, entities like Jacobin and other media. Of course, you have the New York Times and other, establishment media that'll never cover this stuff. But I'm glad that you have some media outlets that are covering this and are exposing this guy for being who he is. It was just a fraud. I mean, look at his post-presidency life, and then look at someone like Jimmy Carter, who has done humanitarian work all over this globe, a president that didn't get his fair shake, who I think could have been a better president had he just been he was just a victim of circumstance. But Jimmy Carter has used his power in his post-presidency to do some really good and amazing things around the globe. And then you look at Obama. He's basically become an Instagram model president, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
he's just out here partying with celebrities and billionaires, and that's what he's doing, and that's what he feels like he's most good at.
Well, he took his mask off as soon as he got out of office. It's just been 5 years that it's taken for the public to really be ready to reckon with it, right? Obviously, he went and kicked it on Richard Branson's fucking private island with him like a week after Donald Trump's inauguration, when we were all freaking out and everybody's like, "Oh, the world's on fire," and Obama's like, "Look at my vacation," and liberal media is like, "Oh, Obama, he's had so much stress, he deserves a fucking vacation." But I think that the best and the most important part about this reckoning that's now happening with Obama is that it's actually going to be really fruitful for us to continue to look back and how it interplays with the conversation that we just had, right? All those people that do exist that were Obama voters that then voted for Trump, like where does Vaush think those people go? All these racists that were just so vile and racist that they couldn't put anything above their Nazi level hatred for fucking anybody that didn't have Aryan skin tones, except they voted for Obama twice, and then they voted for.
They left Klans ralies and then went to the polls to vote for
So
Obama.
I just think that the fact that we can finally start looking at Obama as a tool of the oligarchy, as somebody who embodied this kind of yuppie politics to a T that was never successful in the 80s under Gary Hart, but was rebranded and made cool again in 08 by Obama, where he's, we're going to talk about big vision and yet really what we're going to do is cozy up to corporations, and we're going to dream with the corporations, right? This was, the rise of Obama was really the rise of Silicon Valley in a big way, right? This idea that, we are going to have these companies that are going to be our problem solvers. These are going to be the people that are innovators. Apple, Tesla, Google, all of these people are going to, they're the ones that are going to guide our way. That all happened under Obama, and I think that was very intentional. And I think that that's all being exemplified now, through his, huge assets and lavish lifestyle, and the fact that he just doesn't give a fuck that half of the country is living in absolute poverty right now.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And also, Manny, I just wanted to speak to your point a little bit. You're not the only one who was inspired by Obama in the early days of his presidency before he kind of proved himself to be a fraud. Obviously, I'm a lot, younger, or not a lot. I don't know how old you are, but I'm a little bit younger.
34.
Than you. Okay, well, I'm a little bit younger than you. But I mean, most of my childhood was spent under the Bush administration. Obviously, I was constantly, hearing about the war and all of this, horrible stuff, the drilling in the Arctic, and it was just nonstop. And I did grow up in a household where my parents are both Democratic voters. So obviously I heard even more about how terrible
Right.
Bush was. So I remember quite specifically, and I've said this before, feeling actually proud to be American for the very first time in my life when Obama was elected president, because it just felt like such a big shift in the way things were going. It felt like a real new direction, a real progressive direction. And again, I mean, obviously looking back, you can point to the fact that he took more money from Goldman Sachs than anyone, and even when he was a congressperson, he wasn't particularly like that lefty in the first place. So,
No.
you can say all that, but for me at the time, as a young person that really didn't even know what the fuck was going on, it felt like something was happening. It really felt like he was going to bring that change. And then obviously for that to not happen at all, I think it's fair to say that, instilled in me a pretty massive disillusionment with the Democratic Party from my early upbringing that stayed with me ever since. I know now not to trust these fools. I know now not to trust these charlatans, and to look at the campaign finance is a big thing. That's not unimportant. I think that's, something that Bernie Sanders was able to point out in the wake of Obama's presidency by, running his grassroots campaign. He's like, you can put your faith in me a lot easier than you did someone like Obama, because you can't look at my campaign records and see that I'm funded by Wall Street. So I think that was an important thing that happened too. But something that else that's really fascinating about this article that I think you alluded to a little bit, Manny, is just, how disgraceful Obama's post-presidency has been, especially compared to other presidents, even ones that did horrible things. This says that even George Bush declined to serve on corporate boards. I didn't know that, and obviously, fuck George Bush. Like I said, I grew up my childhood under the reign of this disgusting war criminal bastard. But you can't even say that about Obama, that he declined to serve on corporate boards.
I think that's
right?
Bush Senior, though.
Oh, George H.W. Bush. You're right.
Yeah,
Okay.
same thing. Same difference.
Whatever. Yeah. Anyway, I didn't know that either. I mean, that's still something that all presidents should do. Decline to serve on corporate boards. That's obvious corruption right there. But yeah, it talks about how even a lot of the other presidents that we don't consider to be good at all, where they spent their post presidency doing better shit than Obama did, who's basically, like you said, just become an influencer, an Instagram president, a brand. So, this is a great article. I definitely recommend you guys check it out. And I also wanted to quickly play and react to this clip from a recent Crystal Kyle episode where they talk to the funky academic, and they talk a little bit about Obama and his legacy. So let's take a look at this and react to that.
Here are your full thoughts on Barack Obama, his election, the way what his role has been in society. And the reason this relates to Simone Biles is because you and others were recalling that he was the one who called the NBA players when they were on strike, when they weren't following the pre-approved script. They were on strike in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter protesters. And Barack Obama, who barely ever deigns to get his hands dirty in anything, got right on the phone to get them back on the court. Talk a little bit about that and then the way that he was rewarded. But I want to know a little bit more broadly, how you view the former president and what the ways in which he has used his power.
Yeah, I think the former president is very dangerous to anybody who cares about the progressive left. He's young enough and vain enough. I don't think people understand his narcissism. He will screw up tens of millions of people so that he doesn't look bad. Because you have to understand that he spent 8 years telling people that none of this stuff is possible. So if people start talking about Medicare for all, people start talking about a federal job guarantee, people start talking about legal care for all, people start talking about anything like a UBI, any of these things, if any of it actually gets talked about in public as serious, it makes him look like a do-nothing fraud who took the safe way. And he was a do-nothing fraud. I mean, Barack Obama's biggest political talent is getting Barack Obama elected. He wasn't good for the Democrats. We lost, I want to say 1,000 state legislative seats.
1,000 state legislative seats. We had more Republicans controlled more legislatures and had the trifecta in more states, lost the House, lost the Senate, and then ultimately hand the presidency to Donald J. Trump. So there you go.
So what that means is he confused so many people about what it means to be a Democrat that we lost 13 governors' mansions. So those are the wages of vacuous politics. He confused so many people about what it means to govern that you get Trump. And that's what you have, a confused nation going to the electorate. You have someone who's actually offering you something in Trump, a wall or whatever, versus like Obama, who just kind of offers you pictures of Obama.
Hey,
And
Iremy, what do you think? I'm interested in your answer to this. Like, to some extent, don't you think all politicians who get to that level where they're that successful and they win the presidency, when I think of Obama, when I think of Trump, when I think of Bush, all of them seem to be better at the skill of campaigning and branding and marketing than they were at any sort of governing. So do you think that that's just part and parcel of somebody who wins the presidency? It's like their only talent almost has to be that they're just really persuasive in front of.
And I actually think it's a great point from Kyle that I wanted to just quickly respond to, because it actually goes to something that I've been saying for a while now, and I've seen some other people now starting to say this too. But like maybe a year ago or so, I made the observation that Obama's a lot like the Democratic Reagan, in the sense that, you know, he didn't actually really like transform the country in a good way, but his party is always going to look back at him with this unwarranted nostalgia because he was such a good speaker. He was such a, you know, statesmanly presence, and especially compared to Donald Trump, he definitely had a more calm and, you know, professional, polite aura that was you know, able to win elections, at least for himself. Like Amari,
let's be honest, he was the safe, promotable black dude.
Yeah,
he made white people feel comfortable.
Like,
let's be honest.
Point.
That's a big part. That's a big part of Obama's legacy too. Like you have to discuss it. Like, he was the safe black dude. You know, you felt safe. You felt warm and cuddly around him. You know, and that actually contributed to a lot of his appeal amongst a large swath of the electorate. Right. First of all, I like to say that the Funky Academic is awesome. Go check him out. He's great. I love that guy. I feel smarter every time I listen to him. But, you know, he hit it spot on, man. I mean, he's a fraud. He was a do-nothing fraud. I mean, that's the perfect encapsulation of Obama, a do-nothing fraud. And
with a brilliant marketing team.
Yeah, with a brilliant marketing team. And look, Obama was probably one of the most gifted politicians of the last 50.
Yeah, just like Reagan. You know,
that's why he's just gifted. Yeah, he and honestly, he's even more gifted than Reagan, because what Reagan lacked in kind of political knowledge and instinct, he made up for it with his charm and charisma. You know, I feel like Obama had it all. He just chose not to use it. You know,
I mean, he was as he likes to tell everybody, he was a law professor. You know,
right? Exactly, right. He never misses an opportunity to say that. No, look, listen, Obama is just a huge piece of wasted potential. That's just essentially what he is. He's just a huge piece of wasted potential. He could have been so much more. He could have been this, you know, emblematic leader, and he's become like a very cartoonish version of himself, right? Like, he's just become this like villainous, odious, cartoonish version of himself that, you know, and again, I stress this. If you were to look back at 2007, 2008 and think that, you know, we're here in 2021, and this is what came from the Obama legacy. This is what transpired from the election of Barack Obama. I think you would sit there and be shocked. Like, wow, I never would have thought that this is what would happen. And I want to add one more thing, because, you know, Kyle alluded to it in the segment there before we cut it off. It was like, a lot of these politicians, when they get to that point, a lot of them are better at campaigning and selling the brand than they are governing, because applying for a job is always easier than doing the job. Everybody, you know, like, that's easy. Anybody can sit in front of you know, I should say everybody, but a lot of people have the talent to sit there and just answer a bunch of fluff pieces and fluff questions and sell yourself and sell your brand. But to actually sit there, go to work every day, do the job, excel at it, govern, the skill of governing, that's a skill unto itself.
Yeah.
Governing.
Well, the best thing that I think
that.
The best point I think that Amari made there, the Funky Academic, I think that's his name, right?
Funky Academic. Yep.
He said that the election of Trump were the wages of a vacuous politics, and that is exactly what the fuck happened. We were sold Obama's ego, just like we were sold every other politician's ego. We were sold the man, the diplomat, the statesman, the individual, the character of Obama, right? Why would we then not expect that 8 years down the line, after this guy's delivered us nothing, that an even more egotistical and even more brash figure is able to rise into American politics? Like, you reap what you sow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I did want to say huge shout out and thank you to Kate for the $20 super chat. You say F Obama's library, wanted it in the park, not Hyde Park, to hoodie. Obama's chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, Chicago's now ex-mayor, gifted Obama public lakefront parkland on the National Register for free with a $1 to $2 billion budget. So that's just totally insane. And obviously, you know, I guess Obama deserves his presidential library as much as any other past president, but to do it in such grotesque conditions, again, on this ecologically fragile area in Chicago, it's absolutely monstrous. It's a monstrosity. And it's really just gross that presidents do get to build themselves these, like, you know, multi-billion-dollar monuments to their legacy when most of them are literal war criminals. All of them, if you go by Noam
Obama
Chomsky.
included. Yep.
Yeah, especially started like what 4 or 5 fucking wars.
Took us from 2 wars to 7.
Exactly.
And that we're still in, by the way.
Yeah, they're just outsourced to private mercenaries at this point.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's. I keep saying it again and again. It's a subject that I feel so passionate about because, again, I was there in 2008. I was 22 years old, and my political awakening was happening, and I'm falling in love with politics, and I'm falling in love with this guy that was running for office and the inspirational figure that he was, and all that he represented, and then just to feel like just the ultimate just feeling of deflation and just. You know, I felt duped. I felt like
betrayal.
Betrayal. And I feel like that's why I relate to a lot of these Trump voters that feel like, you know, that because we were all duped. We were all duped. We were all sold a bill of goods that we never got our return on investment on. Never.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Just like how Obama ran on hope and change, Trump ran on make America great again. Is basically the same message, and it was equally under-delivered on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's the nail on the head, right? Like I think that was a really good way of connecting the dots of how Obama brought us Trump in a way that is not often discussed, right? Like Obama's sick, raging ego played a dramatic role. And obviously, like, I don't, like, you know what I mean? I don't want to single Obama out, right? Because every politician has like a sick, raging ego, like they were saying that ascends to the presidency. But it was just part of the stepping stone that got us to where Donald Trump was. Like, it doesn't read like an aberration if you kind of look at the steps that way. And I think it's really, something that's a necessity for us to reevaluate because, again, it is going to be that ego driven character, that leader, that phony leader, perhaps, Manny, but somebody's going to try and fill that role of the leader. Like you said, like, I haven't seen a leader in politics in so long. Nobody wants to be a fucking leader. Well, the leader is going to come along with a massive fucking ego next. And who knows what the fuck form it'll take, but it'll definitely be some charlatan figure. And I think that, this is something that we should all be looking out for, both on the left and as individuals who are like anti-authoritarian on the right. I guess that's it for today. I don't have any other stories.
Yeah. Obama's legacy is going to be something that is going to be very interesting to talk about for the next, 10, 15, 20 years, because he is it's hard to say I've seen anyone, at least since I've been following politics, that's had such a fall from grace from where he was and what he could have been to now just being, again, like this just caricature of himself and just like this.
Look, I want to ask you something, Manny, that's, I think, interesting, because obviously the three of us are all on the same page as it comes to this. But I'm interested in what you think about the general populace and especially the Democratic electorate. Do you think that they're as caught up to this reality as we are? Because to be honest, in my personal life, a lot of the liberals I interact with, a lot of the people that do generally vote blue, they still love Obama. Like I said, it's that Reagan effect. They feel so much nostalgia for him. They think, oh, everything was great when Obama was president. Like, this rose-colored, view of what happened. And they're like, we just got to get another Obama. We have to get someone else that embodies that politics. And there is a good amount of people that seem to have woken up and realized what we have. But how much work do you think there is left to do on that front as far as awakening the Democratic electorate as well as other people?
A lot of work, Gav. It's a lot of work because I think so much of politics right now has become so tribalistic, right? It's very much us against them, my team versus your team. I host a sports show. It's very much like having your favorite sports team. It's like our QB is our QB. He's our guy. Don't you dare talk about our guy. He's Tom Brady. He's the GOAT. He's our guy. You know what I mean? So a lot of politics has become that, sadly, because it should never be that. Politics should never be this like sycophantish game of like, like worship that we've essentially delved into with politics over the last 20 years. But a lot of people still feel like Obama's the beacon of hope and change that he sold a lot of people on. And it's going to take a long time for that veneer to come kind of crashing down. Some people are starting to get enlightened about it. Some people are starting to wake up from it, but I think it's going to take a long time. And I think the thing that helps Obama is that he's still, even with all the things that we talked about, he's still very likable. He still comes across well. I think he's someone that still represents himself well as far as just from the appearance perspective, right?
Yeah,
he's a good
exactly.
family man. He's
No, I know
never
what you're
had
saying.
he's never had any real controversy as far as that goes. So the package, and then of course Michelle Obama is someone that's very popular, very much an admired figure in political politics, in political and social culture, right? So it's going to take a long time to really kind of open people's minds up to kind of seeing what Obama is truly and has become. And maybe hopefully he can right some of these wrongs. I mean, who knows? Maybe he can have a change of heart as he gets older in life and maybe say, hey, I'm going to use my powers for good. I don't see it happening. Obviously, if it happened now, I doubt it's going to ever happen. But yeah, to answer your point, I just don't see it changing anytime soon.
Yeah, well, it seems like,
and especially when you have media outlets like CNN and MSNBC who completely just
they don't tell you
whitewash
anything.
all of this history.
Right.
Yep.
They didn't tell anyone about how Citigroup picked Obama's cabinet appointments. They don't talk about any of that stuff. But I think you're absolutely correct there. And there's just so many people that want to hang on to this version of Obama that never even actually existed, period. But they cling on to it as if it did. And it's just so weird. And it is super counterproductive as far as actually, progressing, because I think part of progressing needs to be a reckoning with the fact that Obama failed and that we need to embrace a different politics, a less corrupt politics, etc. Unfortunately, so many people are still on this page, but I think we had a really good conversation about this in general. And again, as before we go, Manny, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to, plug your show, let everyone know where to find you and your podcast, follow you on social media and on YouTube, etc.
Yeah. Again, Manny Brown, as always, host of Any Given Sunday, co-host of Any Given Sunday. Shout out to my co-host Josh Rodriguez. He's also a leftist, just like me. He's more I joke with him. He's more pragmatic than I am. I'm the revolutionary here. He's more.
Well,
of like,
we'd love to have that perspective on the show too.
No, definitely. He's watching right now. So yeah.
Debating.
Yeah, man, we'll get you on the fucking show. We'll
No, for sure. Yeah, we'll definitely set something up. Yeah, we'll definitely set something up. But yeah, shout out to Josh, who's watching right now, of course. And yeah, Any Given Sunday, new episodes each and every Sunday. Although for the month of August, we're doing every other week, not every Sunday. And then we're doing episodes on Monday, just because Josh is out covering different things and doing his day job. So we had to kind of shift the schedule around. But we'll be back to every Sunday right at the start of the NFL season. And we talk sports, we talk politics, we talk music, we talk a bunch of things, mostly sports and politics, though. A good
and it's on
blend of
YouTube
that.
now.
So yeah, and it's on YouTube. Yeah, so go follow our YouTube page, go subscribe. Any Given Sunday podcast on YouTube, and of course, it's available on all platforms. And you can follow me on Twitter at @DManuelBrown.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on and jumping on. It's always good to have your perspective on the show. We're excited to do a full-on Any Given Sunday podcast crossover with you guys at some point. That'll be awesome. Yeah, just really great having your perspective on Obama. Somebody who's come up through the being an Obama supporter, really throughout your formative political years, and then coming up to this. It's always good to have that set of perspective. So thanks, man, so much. Obviously, you got a permanent home here on the Vanguard, but thanks so much for coming on. We love you, brother, and take care.
Thank you, guys, as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Manny. That was awesome. Great chat overall. Really just a rich conversation, as always, with Manny Brown. So make sure to follow him on Twitter. The link's in the description, or rather his handle is in the description. And also make sure to give his channel a sub on YouTube. I think it's dope that they've finally made their way to YouTube. Did you want to say something, Zach?
No, I'm good.
Okay, cool. No problem. Well, before we head off, I did just want to quickly shout out our patrons once more. That link is in the description, guys. It's the top link in the description if you want to join our Patreon community. It's patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. And like I said, it's that top one in the description if you want to click it to join our community. We like to shout out our patrons at the beginning and end of every live stream, at the end of all of our videos and the credits. We also give you guys access to our Discord server, early access to our book club episodes, priority on our monthly Q&As and more. So definitely go check that out, guys. It's the first link in the description. Again, we have a lot of fun with our Patreon community, and if you want to join, that's the easiest way. So thanks so much for everyone tuning in today. Really appreciate it. Even if you can't support us via Patreon, that's totally fine. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button to help promote the stream in the algorithm, and hit that notification button too, because we go live hella impromptu. You know, sometimes we're going live at like 2 in the afternoon. Today it was a little bit later. Someday, one of these days, we're going to hit you guys with a late night stream. So you don't want to miss that. You know what I'm saying? Like if it's going to be midnight or some shit and we go live, you're probably not going to fucking be on YouTube. So you're going to want to have those notifications on so you know when that shit's happening. But anyway.
Yeah, and we also have a dank ass fucking Vanguard interview coming up. So Gavin, I don't know if you want to give the people a little bit of a plug for a big fucking interview that we're both super excited.
Yeah, that's a great point, Zach. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, we do have a big announcement tomorrow. We're going to be welcoming the great Abby Martin onto the podcast. So we're super excited to talk to Abby, someone that Zach and I have both been a longtime fan of, big admirer of, and have really wanted to engage with in a discourse on our program. So we're so excited and honored to be welcoming Abby Martin to the program tomorrow. And again, if you guys aren't subscribed already, do it now. You're not going to want to miss that conversation. You really, really aren't.
Peace out, everybody.